So I was thinking about Drake's discography the other day, and one project that always feels kind of strange in it is More Life. Not strange in a bad way, just different from the rest of his albums. Because when people talk about Drake projects, they usually bring up things like Take Care or Nothing Was the Same. Those feel like full albums with a clear identity. But More Life always felt like something else entirely. And that's probably because Drake himself didn't even call it an album. He called it a playlist, which at first sounded like a marketing talk, but when you actually listen to the project, it kind of makes sense. The whole thing feels less like one story and more like bunch of different sounds sitting next to each other. You'll go from a laid back track to something way more upbeat, and then suddenly you are hearing influences that don't even feel strictly hip hop anymore. A good example is Passionfruit. That song doesn't really feel like a traditional rap at all. It's way more smooth and mellow, almost like late night background music, and somehow it became one of the biggest songs from the project. Then you've got tracks like Fake Love, which feel like much closer to the typical Drake formula. Catchy hook, direct lyrics, something that clearly works for radio and playlists. So the project kind of moves back and forth between these different vibes. One moment it's relaxed and melodic, the next moment it's trying something louder or more energetic. And honestly, that's probably the most interesting thing about More Life. It doesn't feel like it's trying to stick to one lane the whole time. Some people liked that about it because it made the project feel loose and unpredictable. But at the same time, that's also why some listeners never really treated it like one of Drake's major albums. Because when you think about it, classic albums, there's usually some kind of theme or direction trying everything together. With More Life, it's more like Drake just opened the door to a bunch of different sounds he was interested in at the moment. And to be fair, Drake has always done that to some extent. Throughout his career, he's jumped from different styles pretty easily, sometimes within the same album. But More Life really leaned into that idea. It almost feels like a snapshot of where Drake was musically at that time instead of a carefully structured project. And that's why the playlist label actually fits it. It feels less like something you're supposed to sit down and analyze from start to finish, and more like a collection of songs you can jump into whenever. At the same time, though, the project still has moments that stick with people years later. Songs like Passion Fruit are still getting played all the time, which says a lot about how strong some of the individual tracks are. So, even if More Life isn't always the first project people mention when they talk about Drake's discography, it still holds a weird place in it. It's not exactly a traditional album, but it's not just a random collection of songs either. It's somewhere in between. And maybe that's why it's still interesting to go back to, not because it's trying to be Drake's most important project, but because it shows a different side of how he approaches music.